Marcus Blackwood had built an empire from nothing. At 35, he owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago, commanded respect from politicians and businessmen alike, and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city he had conquered. People called him the Vampire King behind his back, not because of any supernatural abilities, but because of his ruthless business tactics and his habit of working through the night, draining competitors of their life force in the corporate world. His success came at a price. Marcus had sacrificed relationships, friendships, and family time to build his fortune. His mother, Eleanor Blackwood, had always been his anchor, the one person who could see through his cold exterior to the boy she had raised. She lived in the family mansion on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling estate that Marcus had bought her after his first major real estate deal. On a cold November evening, Marcus received an urgent call from Dr. Patricia Williams, his mother's physician for the past 15 years. Eleanor had suffered a minor stroke 3 days earlier. The news hit Marcus like a freight train. He had been so consumed with closing a multi-million-dollar deal that he hadn't spoken to his mother in over 2 weeks. Racing through the Chicago traffic in his black Bentley, Marcus's mind filled with guilt and worry. He had always assumed Eleanor would be there forever, strong and independent as she had always been. The thought of losing her made him realize how empty his success felt without her approval and love. When he arrived at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Dr. Williams met him in the hallway outside the intensive care unit. She was a kind woman in her 50s, with graying hair and compassionate eyes that had seen too many families in crisis. "Marcus, your mother is stable, but the stroke has affected her mobility and speech," Dr. Williams explained gently. "She's going to need full-time care during her recovery. The next few months will be crucial." Marcus nodded, trying to process the information. "I'll hire the best nurses, move her to a private facility, whatever she needs." Dr. Williams shook her head. "She's refusing professional care. Eleanor is very specific about wanting to stay in her own home, and she's chosen someone rather unexpected to help her." Confused, Marcus followed the doctor into his mother's room. Eleanor lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than he had ever seen her. Her silver hair was spread across the pillow, and her usually bright blue eyes seemed dimmed by exhaustion. But when she saw her son, a weak smile crossed her face. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice slightly slurred from the stroke. "I knew you'd come." He rushed to her bedside, taking her hand gently. "Mom, I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. Dr. Williams says you need care, and I want to get you the best." Eleanor squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "No hospitals? No fancy nurses? I've already found my helper." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the door opened, and a young woman entered carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with long auburn hair that needed washing and clothes that had clearly seen better days. Her jeans were torn at the knees, not fashionably but from wear, and her oversized sweater had small holes along the sleeves. Marcus immediately assumed she was some kind of hospital volunteer or social worker. But then Eleanor's face lit up in a way he hadn't seen in months. "Sarah, dear, these are beautiful," Eleanor said, her voice gaining strength. "Marcus, I want you to meet Sarah Martinez. She's going to be taking care of me." Sarah approached the bed with a gentle smile, carefully arranging the wildflowers in a water cup. "I picked these from the park across from your house, Mrs. Blackwood. I remembered you mentioning how much you love autumn flowers." "Ha!" Marcus stared in disbelief. This young woman, who looked like she hadn't had a proper meal or a warm place to sleep in weeks, was supposed to care for his mother? His business instincts kicked in immediately, assessing the situation with the cold logic that had made him successful. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority he used in boardrooms, "but who exactly are you? And how did you meet my mother?" Sarah looked up at him with startling green eyes that held both wariness and defiance. Despite her obvious poverty, she carried herself with dignity. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I met your mother last week when she was walking in Millennium Park. I was having a difficult time, and she stopped to talk to me." Eleanor reached out and took Sarah's hand. She was sitting on a bench in the cold, Marcus, with nowhere to go. We started talking, and I discovered she had been caring for her grandmother for years before the woman passed away last month. Sarah knows more about caregiving than most trained professionals. Marcus felt his world tilting. His mother, one of the most practical and discerning people he knew, had essentially hired a homeless person to be her caregiver. The very idea seemed insane, dangerous even. "Mom, this is ridiculous," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice low but firm. "You need proper medical care, trained professionals. I can afford the best. Money isn't everything, Marcus." Eleanor interrupted, her voice gaining the stern tone he remembered from his childhood. "Sarah has something more important than credentials. She has compassion and experience. She understands what it means to care for someone you love." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension in the room. "Maybe I should go," she said quietly. "I don't want to cause problems for you and your family, Mrs. Blackwood." "Absolutely not," Eleanor said firmly. "Marcus, sit down and listen to me." Despite being a powerful businessman who commanded million-dollar meetings, Marcus found himself sitting in the hospital chair like a scolded child. Eleanor had that effect on people. 3 months ago, when you were busy with that casino project in Las Vegas, I fell in the garden, Eleanor began. I was lying there for over an hour before the mail carrier found me. It made me realize how alone I've become. When I met Sarah last week, I saw something in her that reminded me of myself at that age. Determination, kindness, and strength despite difficult circumstances. Sarah looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable being discussed. Marcus studied her more carefully, noticing details he had missed in his initial shock. Her clothes might be worn, but they were clean. Her hair, while needing a wash, was neatly braided. Her fingernails were short and clean, and despite her obvious poverty, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. Sarah lost her job at a nursing home 2 months ago when the facility closed down, Eleanor continued. She's been caring for elderly patients for over 4 years, starting when she was just 17 and helping with her grandmother. She knows how to help someone recover from a stroke, how to encourage physical therapy, and most importantly, she knows how to treat people with respect and kindness. Marcus looked at Sarah with new eyes. "Is this true?" "I worked at Sunset Manor on the South Side. When corporate decided to close our facility, they gave us 2 weeks' notice. I couldn't find another job quickly enough to keep my apartment." She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "Your mother is offering me a chance to do what I love most, helping someone heal, while having a safe place to stay. I would never take advantage of her kindness." Williams, who had been quietly observing the conversation, stepped forward. "Marcus, I've spoken with Sarah extensively over the past few days. She's knowledgeable about stroke recovery, medication management, and physical therapy assistance. While unconventional, your mother's choice isn't medically unsound." Marcus felt his carefully controlled world spinning out of his grasp. Everything about this situation went against his instincts. He had built his success on calculated risks, thorough background checks, and trusting only proven quantities. Yet here was his mother, placing her life in the hands of a homeless young woman she had known for barely a week. "I want to run a background check," Marcus said finally, "and I want to interview you properly, understand your qualifications, your history." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Blackwood. I would want the same thing if it were my mother. I have references from Sunset Manor, including Dr. Richard Martinez, no relation, who supervised our medical care. I also have letters of recommendation from 3 families I helped through private care arrangements." Eleanor smiled proudly. "See, Marcus? She's not just some random person. Sarah is intelligent, experienced, and honest. She could have told me what she thought I wanted to hear, but instead she was completely truthful about her situation." Over the next hour, Marcus found himself engaged in the most unusual job interview of his life. Sarah answered his questions with quiet confidence, describing her experience with stroke patients, her knowledge of physical therapy exercises, and her approach to medication management. She spoke about her grandmother's final months with a tenderness that made Marcus think of his own relationship with Eleanor. What struck him most was Sarah's honesty about her limitations. She didn't try to oversell her abilities or make promises she couldn't keep. When Marcus asked about her background, she explained that she had aged out of foster care at 18 and had been working to support herself and her grandmother ever since. "I know I don't look like much right now," Sarah said, meeting his eyes directly, "but I promise you, if your mother gives me this chance, I will take better care of her than anyone else could. She won't just be a patient to me, she'll be family." Eleanor reached out and squeezed Sarah's hand. "She already is, dear." As the evening wore on and visiting hours ended, Marcus found himself in an impossible position. Every logical part of his brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. He didn't know this young woman, couldn't verify her story completely, and was essentially being asked to trust his mother's life to someone who had been homeless just days ago. But something in Sarah's eyes reminded him of his mother's stories about his own childhood. Eleanor had been a single mother, struggling to raise Marcus after his father left when he was 8 years old. She had worked 2 jobs, lived in a tiny apartment, and scraped together every penny to give her son opportunities. People had judged her then, assumed she couldn't provide for a child because of their circumstances. Walking to his car in the hospital parking garage, Marcus felt more conflicted than he had in years. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from his assistant about the casino deal, but he ignored them all. For the first time in his adult life, business seemed completely irrelevant. He thought about the past few years and realized that while he had been building his empire, he had lost touch with the values his mother had taught him. Eleanor had always helped people in need, volunteering at soup kitchens and donating to charities even when she could barely afford it herself. She saw potential in people, where others saw only problems. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Sarah's eyes, the way they had held both hope and resignation, as if she was used to doors closing in her face but still dared to hope this one might stay open. He thought about his mother's words about compassion being more important than credentials. At 3 a.m, he made a decision that would have shocked his business associates. Instead of hiring a private investigator to run an extensive background check on Sarah, he decided to trust his mother's judgment, but he would implement his own safeguards and monitoring system. The next morning, Marcus returned to the hospital with a proposal. He would allow Sarah to care for Eleanor, but under specific conditions. He would hire a part-time nurse to visit daily, install a medical alert system in the house, and provide Sarah with proper supplies and training updates. In return, Sarah would have to agree to weekly check-ins with him and submit to periodic evaluations by Dr. Williams. Sarah listened to his terms with growing amazement. Not only was he agreeing to let her care for his mother, but he was offering to provide her with professional development opportunities and a comprehensive benefits package that included health insurance and a substantial salary. "Why?" Sarah asked quietly. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus looked at his mother, who was beaming with pride and satisfaction. "Because my mother has never been wrong about people," he said, "and because sometimes the best business decisions are the ones that don't make sense on paper." As Eleanor was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, Marcus felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He was about to discover whether his mother's faith in a homeless young woman would prove justified, or whether he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. What he couldn't have anticipated was how much this decision would change not just his mother's life, but his own understanding of what truly mattered. The Vampire King of Chicago was about to learn that sometimes the most powerful transformations come from the most unexpected sources. 3 weeks into Sarah's care of Eleanor, Marcus found himself making unexpected visits to his mother's house. What had started as daily check-ins motivated by suspicion had evolved into something he couldn't quite define. Each time he arrived at the mansion expecting to find evidence that hiring Sarah had been a mistake, He instead discovered scenes that challenged everything he thought he knew about caregiving and human connection. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Marcus let himself into the house using his key, planning to conduct one of his unannounced inspections. The smell hit him first, not the antiseptic odor of hospitals or nursing facilities that he had expected, but the warm aroma of homemade soup and fresh bread. Following the scent to the kitchen, he stopped in the doorway, stunned by what he saw. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, laughing genuinely for the first time since her stroke. Her speech had improved dramatically, and she was actively participating in physical therapy exercises while Sarah prepared lunch. But it wasn't just the medical progress that shocked Marcus, it was the transformation in Sarah herself. The hollow-cheeked, desperate young woman he had met in the hospital had been replaced by someone who seemed to glow with purpose and health. Her hair, now regularly washed and styled, caught the light from the kitchen window. She had gained weight, filling out her clothes in a healthy way, and her eyes sparkled with energy and happiness. "Marcus," Eleanor called out, noticing her son in the doorway. "Perfect timing. Sarah's making that butternut squash soup recipe I taught her, and it smells even better than mine." Sarah turned from the stove, smiling warmly. Over the past weeks, her initial wariness around Marcus had faded, replaced by a comfortable friendship built on their mutual care for Eleanor. "I added a little extra sage like you suggested yesterday, Mrs. Blackwood. And I made fresh rolls too." Marcus couldn't help but notice how naturally Sarah moved around the kitchen, how she instinctively adjusted Eleanor's position to be more comfortable, how she seemed to anticipate his mother's needs before Eleanor even expressed them. This wasn't just professional caregiving, it was the kind of intuitive care that came from genuine love and attention. "How was physical therapy today?" Marcus asked, settling into a chair beside his mother. "Wonderful," Eleanor beamed. Sarah found these exercises online that are specifically designed for stroke recovery. "We've been working on balance and coordination. Show him, Sarah." Sarah blushed slightly but moved to Eleanor's side. "It's nothing special, just research I did. Mrs. Blackwood is making incredible progress. Yesterday she walked from her room to the garden without using the walker." Marcus watched as Sarah guided Eleanor through a series of gentle exercises, her touch confident but tender, her encouragement constant but never condescending. It was clear that Sarah had studied extensively, learning new techniques and approaches to help Eleanor recover more effectively. Over lunch, Marcus found himself drawn into a conversation about literature. Sarah, he discovered, was a voracious reader who had maintained her love of books despite her difficult circumstances. She and Eleanor had been working through Eleanor's extensive library together, discussing everything from classic novels to contemporary poetry. "Sarah has the most interesting perspectives on Steinbeck," Eleanor said proudly. "She sees connections between The Grapes of Wrath and modern economic inequality that I never considered. I just think a lot about social issues, you know? When you've experienced poverty firsthand, you read those books differently." Marcus found himself genuinely engaged in the discussion, impressed by Sarah's insights and analytical thinking. He realized that in all his assumptions about her background, he had never considered her intelligence or education. As the conversation continued, he learned that Sarah had earned her GED while caring for her grandmother and had been taking online college courses whenever she could afford them. "I was working toward a degree in social work," Sarah explained when Marcus asked about her educational goals. "I had to stop when Grandma got sicker and needed more care. Then when she died and I lost my job, well, college seemed impossible again." Eleanor reached over and patted Sarah's hand. "Nothing is impossible, dear. We just need to find different paths sometimes." That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave, he lingered in the living room where Sarah was helping Eleanor with her evening medications. He watched as Sarah carefully organized pills, explained each one's purpose, and gently encouraged Eleanor to drink more water. The level of care and attention was extraordinary. "Sarah," Marcus said suddenly, "can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Sarah nodded, ensuring Eleanor was comfortable in her favorite chair with a book and blanket. Before following Marcus to his mother's study, she stood respectfully, hands clasped in front of her, and Marcus realized she was still somewhat intimidated by him despite their growing familiarity. "I owe you an apology," Marcus began, which clearly surprised Sarah. "When I first met you, I made assumptions based on your appearance and circumstances. I was wrong." Sarah's eyes widened. "Mr. Blackwood, you don't need to apologize. You were protecting your mother. I understand that." "No, listen to me," Marcus continued. "In 3 weeks, you've accomplished more with my mother's recovery than I thought possible. Her doctors are amazed by her progress. But more than that, you've given her something I didn't even realize she was missing. Joy. She's happier than I've seen her in years." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "She's given me more than I can ever repay. A home, purpose, the chance to do work I love. I wake up every morning grateful for this opportunity." Marcus studied her face, seeing the genuine emotion there. "What are your long-term goals, Sarah? I mean, beyond caring for my mother?" Sarah hesitated, as if afraid to voice her dreams aloud. "I'd love to finish my degree, maybe get into healthcare administration or social work. I want to help create better systems for people aging at home, people who fall through the cracks like I did." She paused, then added quietly, "But right now, caring for Mrs. Blackwood is exactly where I want to be." Dad. That conversation stayed with Marcus as he drove home to his empty penthouse. For the first time in years, he found himself thinking about purpose beyond profit, about legacy beyond financial success. Sarah's transformation from desperate homeless woman to confident, skilled caregiver had happened because someone his mother had seen potential where others saw only problems. Over the following weeks, Marcus began spending more time at his mother's house. Initially, he told himself it was to monitor the situation, but he gradually admitted that he enjoyed the warmth and life that now filled the previously quiet mansion. Sarah's presence had brought an energy to the house that Marcus hadn't realized had been missing. He started timing his visits around meals, drawn by both Sarah's excellent cooking and the lively conversations that filled the dining room. Sarah never made him feel like an intruder in his mother's space. Instead, she naturally included him in activities and discussions, treating him as family rather than an employer. One evening, Marcus arrived to find Sarah and Eleanor in the garden, working together to prepare the flower beds for winter. Eleanor's mobility had improved so much that she could walk short distances without assistance and could use gardening tools with minimal difficulty. But what struck Marcus most was the scene's domesticity and contentment. "I never thought I'd see Mom gardening again," Marcus said, joining them among the chrysanthemums and late-blooming roses. "Sarah researched adaptive gardening techniques," Eleanor explained, showing off a collection of tools with built-up handles that were easier for her to grip. "She ordered these online and has been helping me redesign the layout so I can maintain it myself." Sarah was kneeling beside a flower bed, carefully mulching around the base of the rose bushes. Her jeans were dirty, her hair escaping from its ponytail, and she looked completely absorbed in the work. There was something almost therapeutic about her approach to gardening, as if connecting with the earth grounded her in a way that nothing else could. "I love working with growing things," Sarah said when she noticed Marcus watching her. "My grandmother taught me that taking care of plants teaches you patience and hope. You have to believe in tomorrow to plant seeds today." Eleanor smiled at her son. "Sarah has taught me to see possibility everywhere. Even in winter, she points out the buds that are already forming for spring." As autumn deepened into winter, Marcus witnessed Sarah navigate Eleanor's care through several challenging situations that tested her skills and commitment. When Eleanor caught a mild flu, Sarah managed her care with the competence of a trained nurse, monitoring symptoms, coordinating with Dr. Williams, and ensuring Eleanor's comfort throughout her illness. During a particularly difficult night when Eleanor experienced some confusion and disorientation, a common side effect of her medications, Sarah remained calm and patient, staying awake to provide reassurance and comfort until Eleanor's mental clarity returned in the morning. Marcus received a call from Sarah at 2 in the morning during that incident. Rather than panicking or demanding he rush over, Sarah calmly explained the situation, outlined the steps she was taking, and assured him that she had already spoken with Dr. Peditek. Williamson had everything under control. "I just wanted to keep you informed," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "She's resting comfortably now, but I'll be monitoring her closely for the remainder of the night." When Marcus arrived the next morning, he found Eleanor peacefully sleeping while Sarah sat in a chair beside her bed, alert and attentive despite having been awake all night. It was a level of dedication that went far beyond professional duty. "Sarah, you need to rest," Marcus said gently. "I can stay with Mom while you sleep." Sarah shook her head. "I'm fine. I want to be here when she wakes up so she's not confused or frightened." It was then that Marcus truly understood what his mother had seen in Sarah from the beginning. This young woman possessed a natural instinct for caregiving that couldn't be taught or learned from textbooks. She anticipated needs, provided comfort, and maintained dignity even in difficult circumstances. But Marcus also began to notice the cost of Sarah's dedication. She rarely took breaks, never complained about the demanding schedule, and seemed to put Eleanor's needs above her own consistently. While her health and appearance had dramatically improved since moving into the mansion, Marcus worried that she was sacrificing too much of herself in service to others. One December afternoon, while Eleanor was napping, Marcus found Sarah in the kitchen, bent over a laptop computer, working intently on something. When he approached, he saw she was taking an online course in geriatric care. "You're studying," he observed, impressed by her continued commitment to learning. Sarah looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I enrolled in a few courses to improve my skills. Mrs. Dahl. Blackwood encouraged me to use some of my salary for education. I'm learning about nutrition for elderly patients and advanced physical therapy techniques." Marcus sat down across from her. "Sarah, when was the last time you took a real day off? I mean, left the house, spent time with friends, did something just for yourself?" Sarah's hesitation told him everything he needed to know. She had poured herself so completely into caring for Eleanor that she had neglected her own social and emotional needs. "I don't really have friends here," Sarah admitted quietly, "and I love spending time with your mother. This doesn't feel like work to me." "But you need balance," Marcus said gently. "Mom wouldn't want you to sacrifice your own life for hers." That conversation planted a seed in Marcus's mind. Over the following days, he began to notice other signs that Sarah, while thriving in many ways, was also isolating herself. She mentioned that she had lost touch with former coworkers when Sunset Manor closed, and she seemed to have no social connections outside of her relationship with Eleanor. Marcus started to formulate a plan, but he knew it would require careful consideration. He wanted to find ways to expand Sarah's world while ensuring that Eleanor continued to receive the excellent care that had become so natural between them. Teddy. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to surprise him with her insights and capabilities. She had researched and implemented a comprehensive wellness program for Eleanor that included not just physical therapy and medical care, but also mental stimulation through reading and puzzles, social engagement through video calls with old friends, and creative expression through art projects. Eleanor's recovery had exceeded everyone's expectations. Dr. Williams confided to Marcus that she had rarely seen such dramatic improvement in a stroke patient, crediting both Eleanor's determination and Sarah's exceptional care. "That young woman has a gift, Doctor," Williams told Marcus during one of Eleanor's checkups. "She combines medical knowledge with emotional intelligence in a way that's quite remarkable. Have you considered encouraging her to pursue formal healthcare training?" The suggestion stayed with Marcus, adding to his growing conviction that Sarah's potential extended far beyond her current role as his mother's caregiver. But he also recognized that any opportunities he offered needed to come without pressure or expectation, allowing Sarah to make her own choices about her future. As winter settled over Chicago, the mansion that had once felt too large and quiet for Eleanor alone now buzzed with life and purpose. Sarah's presence had transformed not just Eleanor's daily experience, but the entire atmosphere of the home. What had begun as an emergency arrangement was evolving into something that felt permanent and right. Marcus found himself looking forward to his visits, drawn by the warmth and authenticity of the relationship between Sarah and Eleanor, and increasingly by Sarah's own company. She challenged his assumptions, made him laugh, and reminded him of values he had lost sight of in his climb to success. But as Christmas approached, Marcus sensed that this peaceful period was building towards something significant. Sarah's transformation from desperate homeless woman to confident, skilled caregiver had been remarkable, but he suspected that the next phase of her journey was about to begin, one that would test not only her abilities but also the bonds that had formed between all three of them. Christmas morning arrived with a blanket of fresh snow covering the grounds of Eleanor's mansion. Marcus woke up in his penthouse, but for the first time in years he felt no desire to check his emails or review business reports. Instead, he found himself thinking about the conversation he had planned for today, one that could change Sarah's life forever. Over the past month, Marcus had been quietly working on something that would have shocked his business associates. The man known for his ruthless deals and calculated risks was about to make an offer based purely on faith and human potential. When he arrived at his mother's house that morning, he found Sarah and Eleanor in the kitchen, preparing Christmas breakfast together. The scene was so domestic and warm that Marcus paused in the doorway, struck by how natural it all seemed. Sarah wore a simple green dress that Eleanor had bought for her, her hair styled in a way that highlighted her natural beauty. She was laughing at something Eleanor had said while expertly flipping pancakes at the stove. "Merry Christmas, son," Eleanor called out, her voice strong and clear. Her recovery had been nothing short of miraculous, and while she still moved more slowly than before her stroke, she was essentially independent again. "Merry Christmas, Mom." Sarah. Marcus hung up his coat and accepted a cup of coffee from Sarah, noticing how naturally she anticipated his preferences. Just a touch of cream, no sugar. During breakfast, Marcus watched the easy interaction between the two women who had become so important to him. Sarah still showed Eleanor the respect and deference of a caregiver, but their relationship had evolved into something much deeper. They functioned like a real family, sharing inside jokes, finishing each other's sentences, and showing the kind of mutual care that couldn't be forced or faked. After they had opened presents, Marcus had gotten Sarah a professional tablet for her online courses, while she had surprised him with a first-edition copy of his favorite business biography that she had somehow tracked down. Eleanor announced that she needed to rest for a while before their traditional Christmas dinner. "Sarah, dear, why don't you show Marcus that project you've been working on in the study?" Eleanor suggested with a meaningful look that made Marcus suspect his mother was up to something. Sarah blushed slightly, but led Marcus to Eleanor's study, where she had set up a small workspace in the corner. On the desk were several thick binders, a laptop, and stacks of printed materials. Marcus could see immediately that whatever Sarah had been working on was extensive and well organized. "I hope you don't mind that I've been using this space," Sarah said, suddenly seeming nervous. "Your mother insisted I needed a proper place to study and work on projects." Marcus flipped through one of the binders, amazed by what he found. Sarah had created a comprehensive care manual for elderly patients recovering from strokes, complete with exercise routines, nutritional guidelines, medication management protocols, and emotional support strategies. The work was professional quality, thoroughly written. "Sarah, this is incredible," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "You could publish this. Healthcare facilities would pay good money for a resource like this." "Do you really think so?" "I've been working on it for weeks, documenting everything I learned while caring for Mrs. Biss, Blackwood, and researching best practices. I thought maybe someday it could help other caregivers." Marcus continued examining her work, finding detailed case studies, resource lists, and even sections on family dynamics and emotional care. It was the kind of comprehensive resource that demonstrated not just knowledge, but wisdom and experience. "Sarah, sit down for a minute. I want to talk to you about something." Sarah settled into the chair across from the desk, her expression becoming attentive and slightly worried. Over the months, she had learned to read Marcus's moods. and something in his tone suggested this was important. "First, I want you to know that what you've done for my mother, for our family, goes beyond anything I could have imagined when we first met," Marcus began. "You've given Mom her life back, but more than that, you've shown both of us what real care and dedication look like." Sarah started to speak, but Marcus held up a hand to continue. "I've been thinking a lot about your future, about your potential, and about what you want to accomplish with your life. You mentioned wanting to help people who fall through the cracks, wanting to create better systems for aging and healthcare." "Yes," Sarah said quietly, "that's still my dream." Marcus took a deep breath. "I want to make you an offer, but I need you to understand that there are no strings attached. Whether you accept or not, your position here with Mom is secure for as long as you want it." Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity and anticipation. "I want to fund your education," Marcus said simply. "Full tuition, living expenses, everything. You can finish your bachelor's degree, go on to graduate school, whatever you need to achieve your goals. I'll also provide startup funding if you want to launch your own healthcare consulting business or social service organization." Sarah stared at him in complete shock, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Why? Why would you do that for me?" Marcus smiled, feeling more certain about this decision than he had about any business deal in his career. "Because 6 months ago, you were homeless and desperate, and look what you accomplished when someone gave you a chance. Because my mother saw something in you that I was too blind to see initially. Because I believe you have the potential to help thousands of people, and I want to be part of making that possible." Tears began streaming down Sarah's cheeks. I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever dreamed possible." "There's more," Marcus continued. "I want you to consider partnering with me on a new venture. I've been researching the home healthcare industry, and there's a huge gap in quality, affordable care for people aging in place. We could create something revolutionary, a service that combines your expertise in caregiving with business infrastructure that makes it sustainable and scalable." Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to process everything Marcus was saying. "You want to go into business with me? But I don't know anything about running a company. You know the most important thing. You understand what people need and how to provide it with dignity and compassion. I can handle the business side. Together, we could create something that helps people like you were, and people like Mom who need care but want to maintain their independence." Before Sarah could respond, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, moving slowly but steadily with her cane. "I couldn't help but overhear," Eleanor said with a pleased smile. "Sarah, dear, what do you think?" Sarah looked between Marcus and Eleanor, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. "Mrs. Blackwood, I can't leave you. You still need care, and I—" "Nonsense," Eleanor interrupted gently. "I'm nearly back to full independence, and we both know it. You've prepared me well for managing on my own again. Besides, who says you have to leave? You could live here while you're in school, continue helping me as needed, but also pursue your own dreams." Marcus watched Sarah's face as the full scope of the opportunity became clear to her. She wouldn't have to choose between her own future and caring for Eleanor. She could have both. "I need to think," Sarah said finally. "This is so much more than I ever expected, and I want to make sure I'm making the right decision for everyone. Take all the time you need." That evening, as they sat around the dining room table sharing Christmas dinner, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that day in the hospital. The Vampire King of Chicago, a man who had built his reputation on cold calculation and ruthless ambition, was now offering to invest in human potential based purely on faith and hope. But the transformation hadn't been one-sided. Sarah's presence in their lives had reminded Marcus of values his mother had taught him long before he became successful. The importance of helping others, of seeing potential where others saw problems, of understanding that true wealth came from relationships and purpose, not just bank accounts. Over the following week, as Sarah considered Marcus's proposal, she spent long hours talking with Eleanor about her fears and hopes. She worried about accepting so much help, about whether she was capable of living up to such faith and investment. But Eleanor's wisdom and encouragement gradually helped her understand that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was an opportunity to help others in return. "Dear," Eleanor told her one afternoon as they sat by the fireplace, "Marcus isn't offering you charity. He's offering you partnership. There's a difference. Charity is about giving to those who need help. Partnership is about recognizing equal value and potential." On New Year's Eve, as Marcus and Sarah helped Eleanor prepare for a small party with a few close friends, Sarah finally gave her answer. "I want to accept your offer," she told Marcus, "but I have some conditions of my own. I'm listening. First, I want this to be a real partnership, not just you helping me. I'll take the education funding, but I want to sign a contract that makes me a true business partner with both investment and responsibility." "Agreed," Marcus said immediately. "Second, I want to continue living here and helping your mother for as long as she'll have me. She's family now, and I won't abandon family for career opportunities." Eleanor beamed with joy. "As long as I'll have you." "Sarah, this is your home now. That's not changing." Third, Sarah continued, "I want our business to include a foundation that provides emergency assistance to people in situations like I was in. People who are capable and willing to work but have fallen through the cracks. Not everyone gets as lucky as I did." Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest. This was exactly the kind of thinking that convinced him Sarah would be an extraordinary partner. She understood both the business opportunity and the social responsibility that came with success. "Sarah Martinez," Marcus said formally, extending his hand, "you have yourself a deal." As they shook hands, Eleanor applauded from her chair. "I'm so proud of both of you. This is exactly the kind of partnership that can change the world." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the conference room of their new company headquarters, watching Sarah present their business plan to a group of investors. The transformation was complete. The homeless young woman who had caught his mother's attention in a park was now a confident entrepreneur, articulating a vision for revolutionizing home health care that had attracted interest from across the country. But what struck Marcus most wasn't the professional success or the business accolades. It was the moment after the presentation, when Sarah immediately called Eleanor to share the good news, the way she still insisted on having dinner at the mansion every Sunday, and how she had maintained her fundamental kindness and compassion despite her newfound confidence and success. The Vampire King had learned that sometimes the most profitable investments weren't in buildings or businesses, but in people. And sometimes the people who seemed to need help the most were actually the ones with the most to give. Eleanor, watching her son and Sarah work together to build something meaningful, often reflected on that day in the hospital when Marcus had been so skeptical of her choice. She had seen immediately what it took him months to understand: that Sarah's circumstances didn't define her character, and that given an opportunity, she would not just meet expectations, but exceed them in ways no one could predict. Not as a fairy tale of charity, but as proof that true success came from recognizing potential where others saw only problems, from building relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, and from understanding that the best business decisions were often those that made the world a little bit better. Marcus Blackwood was still called the Vampire King, but now the nickname carried a different meaning. He had learned to use his power and resources to breathe new life into people and communities, creating success that enriched everyone involved rather than draining competitors. And Sarah Martinez, the homeless girl who had once sat on a park bench with nowhere to go, became living proof that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single act of faith from someone willing to see beyond appearances to the heart of who we really are.